Oprah Gail Winfrey was born on January 29, 1954 in Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Her name was a misspelling of the biblical Orpah on her birth certificate. Her mother was an 18-year-old housemaid. Her father, a soldier stationed at Fort Rucker, would not be in her life for years. For the first 6 years, Oprah lived with her grandmother Hattie Mee on a farm with no indoor plumbing, wearing dresses made from potato sacks. Neighborhood children mocked her for it. Her grandmother taught her to read by the age of 3. At 6, she was sent to Milwaukee to live with her mother in a boarding house. What happened there she would not speak about publicly for another 20 years. Beginning at 9 years old, she was repeatedly sexually abused by a cousin, an uncle, and a family friend. At 14, she became pregnant. The baby, a boy, was born prematurely and died in the hospital within 2 weeks. She was sent to Nashville to live with her father, Vernon Winfrey, a barber and a strict disciplinarian. Vernon set the rules: read a book a week, write a report on it, learn a new vocabulary word every day. She would later say that going to live with her father saved her life. At 16, she won an oratory contest that got her a scholarship to Tennessee State University. At 17, she walked into WVOL, a small Nashville radio station, to collect a prize for a beauty pageant. They liked her voice so much they hired her to read the news, part-time, for $100 a week. By 19, she was co-anchoring the evening news at WLAC-TV, the first black woman and youngest anchor in Nashville television history. In 1976, she moved to WJZ-TV in Baltimore for a bigger contract and a bigger stage. And within 2 years, it collapsed. Management said her delivery was too emotional, her interviews too personal. She was pulled from the anchor desk and demoted to a morning talk show called People Are Talking. It felt at the time like a career-ending humiliation. It was actually the discovery of her actual gift. But before she could turn a demotion into a dynasty, she had to survive one more risk: a move to a city where the biggest daytime host in America was already king. And that host was Phil Donahue. In January 1984, a struggling ABC affiliate in Chicago, WLS-TV, hired her to host a dying morning show called AM Chicago. Phil Donahue owned Chicago Daytime. His show was syndicated in more than 200 markets. Nobody expected the new host to survive a season. Within 1 month, AM Chicago went from last place to first. Within 3 months, it was beating Donahue in his own city. In September 1985, the station renamed it The Oprah Winfrey Show and expanded it to an hour. Roger Ebert, on a dinner date with her that same year, did the math on a napkin and told her that if she took her show into syndication, she would make 40 times what she was earning locally. That is where the story usually ends and the myth begins. She syndicated the show. It exploded. She got rich. But that version leaves out the single most important business decision of her life, and possibly of modern television. Here is what actually happened. The company that syndicated her show nationally beginning in September 1986 was King World Productions, the same distributor behind Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. In the standard arrangement, a talk show host is talent. The host works for the station licenses the show from a production company, and the production company owns the tape, the format, the reruns, the merchandising, and every future dollar the property will ever generate. The host gets a salary. When the host is done, the host has a paycheck. The company has a franchise. Oprah looked at that arrangement and said no. If this gets gripping you, save this video. You will want to come back to this one when you hear what she asked for next. In 1986, she incorporated Harpo Productions, Oprah spelled backwards. In 1988, at 34 years old, she cut a deal with Capital Cities ABC and King World that gave Harpo full ownership and production control of the Oprah Winfrey Show. She did not just star in the show. She owned the show. She owned the studio it was filmed in. She owned the format, the tapes, the library, and every dollar that ever flowed from any of it. She became the first African-American woman to own a major television production studio, and the third woman in American history to own a major studio outright, behind only silent film star Mary Pickford and Lucille Ball. That was the turning point. That was the signature that built the empire. Everything you are about to hear, every million, every 100 million, every deal flows from that one moment when a woman from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, told the most powerful men in television that she was not their employee. She was their partner, and she would own her own name. Once she owned the machinery, she started stacking businesses on top of it. By 1993, the Oprah Winfrey Show was seen in 120 countries. In 1994, Forbes estimated her earnings at $74 million for the year. By 1995, that number crossed 171 million. She was by then the highest paid entertainer in television. Then she began building beyond the show. In 1996, she launched Oprah's book club. It did something no publisher had ever seen. When she picked a title, it sold. Not thousands, millions. Publishers began referring to the phenomenon as the Oprah effect. Books she featured, from Toni Morrison to obscure debut novelists, routinely gained 1 million copies in sales overnight. Publishers estimated her book club generated over $500 million in additional revenue for the American publishing industry over its first decade. In 1998, she co-founded Oxygen Media, a cable network aimed at women, with television executives Geraldine Laybourne and Marcy Carsey. In 2007, NBC Universal bought Oxygen for $925 million. Oprah's stake, reportedly around 20%, netted her a payout estimated at over $100 million for a business that was, essentially, a side project. In April 2000, she launched O, the Oprah magazine, in partnership with Hearst. Every single issue for the first several years featured her on the cover, a magazine industry taboo, because covers are supposed to sell newsstands, and repeat covers are supposed to bore readers. She put herself on every cover anyway. It became one of the most successful magazine launches in American history, reaching a circulation of over 2 million copies within its first year. Then, in 2011, she made the biggest bet of her career. After 25 years and 4,800 episodes, she ended the Oprah Winfrey Show and launched The Oprah Winfrey Network as a joint venture with Discovery Communications. It nearly ended her. For the first 2 years, OWN hemorrhaged money. Ratings were catastrophic. Discovery's investment was reported at over $400 million. Analysts wrote her obituary in the trade press. She did what she had always done. She got personally involved, moved production of her interview show to the new network, and hired Tyler Perry to build a slate of scripted dramas. By 2015, OWN was profitable. In 2017, Discovery acquired an additional stake, raising its ownership to about 73%, in a deal that valued Oprah's remaining stake at hundreds of millions of dollars. But the deal that best explains how she thinks about money came in October 2015. Weight Watchers, a nearly 60-year-old company, was collapsing. Its stock had fallen from over $80 a share to under $7. Oprah bought roughly 10% of the company for about $43 million and agreed to become a spokesperson. The stock jumped more than 105% in a single day. Her $43 million stake was worth over $400 million at its peak. She had bought struggling equity, applied her own brand as leverage, and doubled her money before lunch. That is not a talk show host. That is a Wall Street operator. By 2026, the empire looks like this. Harpo Productions, wholly owned. A back catalog of 4,800 episodes of The Oprah Winfrey Show that continues to license worldwide. A magazine dynasty. A stake in OWN. A residual position in Weight Watchers, since renamed WW International, that she began exiting in 2023. A production deal with Apple TV Plus signed in 2018, reportedly worth hundreds of millions. Real estate holdings in California, Hawaii, Colorado, Washington, and New Jersey estimated at over $200 million alone. And roughly, according to Forbes, a net worth of $2.5 billion. But here is what almost every profile of Oprah Winfrey leaves out. She never took her company public. She never sold a controlling stake. She never took venture capital. Harpo Productions has, from day one in 1986, been privately held, first by Oprah and a handful of longtime executives, later almost entirely by Oprah herself. She's one of the very few American billionaires who built a media fortune without ever surrendering equity to outsiders. That is the final twist. The daytime talk show, the book club, the magazine, the Weight Watchers trade, they are all downstream of one thing. In 1988, when she owned nothing but her own name, she refused to be talent. She insisted on being the owner. Every dollar that came after was a dividend on that decision. Drop it in the comments. If you had been in her position in 1986, when the safe move was a fat salary, would you have risked everything to own the whole thing instead? CTA 1213 Min. If stories like this, the real business decisions behind the empires you think you know, are what you come here for, subscribe and hit the bell icon. A new money story every week. The next one is already loaded. Outro 1315 Min. The lesson of Oprah Winfrey is not motivational, it is structural. Fame is rented. Ownership is owned. Every performer in Hollywood earns a salary. Only the ones who insist on the paper, the equity, the library, the studio walls, ever get generational wealth out of it. She understood that at 34, in a room full of men who assumed she never would. Half a century of American entertainment history has been quietly reshaped by hosts, comedians, and athletes trying to copy her playbook, some successfully, most not. If this one hit, my next video will stun you. It is on the man who did the opposite of Oprah, signed away his rights to the biggest character in American cartoon history for a few $100s, and spent the rest of his life watching billionaires get rich off his work. His name was Jerry Siegel, and he co-created Superman. By 2026, Oprah Winfrey is worth roughly $2.5 billion, but her fortune wasn't built by a hit show. It was built by one contract, almost no talent agent in 1986 expected a black woman from Mississippi to demand. This is the story of how Oprah Gail Winfrey, born in 1954 in Kosciuszko, Mississippi, and pregnant at 14, became the first African-American woman to own a major television production studio, and only the third woman in American history to do it, after Mary Pickford and Lucille Ball. From WVOL Radio in Nashville to AM Chicago in 1984, to the 1986 launch of Harpo Productions, to the 1988 ownership deal with King World and Capital Cities ABC, to Oxygen Media's $925 million sale to NBC Universal in 2007, to the $43 million Weight Watchers bet in October 2015 that doubled in a single day. This is the full financial anatomy of the Oprah empire. Hold the way business history should be told. Names, dates, dollar figures, and the one decision that changed everything. 0, 0, 0, 0, the impossible fact 0, 0, 30, the girl nobody bet on 0, 3, 0, 0, Chicago and the contract that changed everything 0, 6, 0, 0, Book Club, Magazine, Oxygen, Weight Watchers 0, 9, 0, 0, the Empire in full 12, 0, 0, Subscribe 13, 0, 0, the lesson and what's next.